What's your background, Dave?
My background?
Yeah.
Oh, that is the Four Seasons.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Ah,
and
well-known concert venue.
yeah, I was going to say physics. Uh,
no, no, I'm at your filter background.
okay. Oh, all righty. So let's give it a couple minutes for people to stream in.
Yep.
But we're fortunate to have Mick West. He's got a great website at uh, metabunk.org, right?
That's right.
Excellent. And he's got a great, sections on contrails. I think that's where I first ran into Mick, was his excellent webpage on the chemtrails phenomenon. But
Yes,
he's done
many years ago.
a lot of work on 9/11 truth conspiracies. And then lately he's been super busy with all the UFO reports that are coming out and the videos. So I'm certainly looking forward to hearing about that. He's been on CNN and had a column in the Guardian. So he got his start writing the Tony Hawk skateboard video game, right?
That's correct.
Right. And so he did really well with that, and has been able to enjoy the life of a leisurely debunker. But he's been honing his skills and developing all kinds of insight into the strange things that people are taking pictures of. So we'll learn about fun stuff like bokeh. I had some in my camera, and I was able to figure out, oh, I must have the hexagonal aperture because of the bokeh I'm looking at. So next month we have. Let me see if we got Austin is in the room. Okay. So James Gover is going to be speaking next month, and maybe in September we'll be ready for live meetings. Might be too early, but okay. Here's Randy. So that'll be on August 11th. So without further ado, I'm going to make Nick a co-host so that you'll be able to share screen and all that.
Yep.
So Mick West is going to talk to us about UAPs and associated phenomena.
All righty. Thank you very much, Dave. Thank you for that good introduction. Let me just turn my screen on here. Let's see. There we go. And now screen sharing. So my talk today is about the great 2021 UFO flap, which is the interesting thing. Let's see. First, let me start again. Could you mute yourself, Dave? You're making a bit of noise there.
Oh, sorry about.
No problem. Okay. All right. So the Great 2021 UFO Flap, or as we now call it, the Great 2021 UAP Flap. We changed from talking about UFOs to UAPs last year and this year. And I think the reason that people did it, the reason that they're pushing this UAP rather than UFO, is that UAP sounds a lot more serious. It is unidentified aerial phenomena, not just UFOs. So people have been going with this, I think, for the same reason that people don't like to talk about chemtrails. They like to talk about geoengineering, and they don't like to talk about aliens. They like to talk about UAPs. So in 2021, we had this report released, this very interesting report by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and it was released in June 2021. And it was a report that was greatly anticipated by the UFO community. People thought, and the media kind of hyped it up as it being the government telling us everything they knew about UFOs, which, if the report was to be believed, wasn't really very much. It was kind of a bit of a disappointment for a lot of people. So it's 9 pages long, and only really 6 pages when you get down to it. And really, you can kind of boil it down to just 1 page, which is the executive summary on page 3, which contains basically the meat of the report. And it says, basically, there is not enough data to draw any firm conclusions about UFOs/UAPs. A few of the reports of these UAPs show unusual characteristics. So the report lists a few strange things that they do, like they move very fast, or they zoom off into the distance, or they're very hard to observe. But the report also says that these unusual characteristics could be sensor errors, spoofing, or observer misperceptions. So it kind of doesn't pours a bit of cold water on that whole idea. The report also says that when we talk about UAPs, there are probably lots of different explanations because these are all different things. And this, I think, is a mistake that a lot of people make when they're talking about UFOs, is they ask, how do we explain UFOs? Or how do we explain this phenomena? When really we're not talking about one phenomena. There's not just one thing that's happening, like, crop circles are just one thing, but UFOs are all kinds of different things. We see lots of different things in the sky. And the official report quite correctly states that there are probably lots of different explanations for lots of different things. One of the explanations that is given is airborne clutter. And this is actually the first thing they list. They list it as a concern because people can bump into airborne clutter. And they list things like birds, balloons, drones, and debris, even things like plastic bags, very, very mundane things. And this was terribly disappointing for the UFO community because they had been mocking me quite mercilessly because I had suggested that some UFOs are actually birds or balloons. And it's getting a little noise there. But in fact, the official report says that these are in fact possible explanations. There are also natural atmospheric phenomena that were listed in the report. This is the official report talking that a lot of these things can be explained as natural atmospheric phenomena, things like ice, clouds, or temperature inversions, or possibly a US secret program that they didn't really think that was very likely. They kind of dismissed that as a possibility. Possibly foreign spy programs. Now, this is actually something they thought is quite likely. And this is something that is a genuine concern. We do have an issue with being spied upon by foreign powers. We do have the concern that people like China. Sorry, somebody's kind of beeping a lot here. I don't know if ever people are hearing that.
So,
someone
Mick, that's
mute.
when I let people in. I don't think I can mute that. It's gonna ding. Sorry about that.
Okay.
But it's just more visitors arriving.
I shall ignore it. That's great. All right.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Let's carry on. Okay, so foreign spy platforms. Yes, this is a real concern and something that the report listed, but not really as a major thing that people are going to be seeing a lot. So, really, they kind of said, they don't really know what's going on, not enough data, probably things like birds and balloons, probably some atmospheric clutter, possibly foreign people spying on us. And then they had this other category where they just said they don't really know. They don't really know what it could be. It could be all kinds of things. More study needed, limited data. So how did this report come about? How did we get into this situation? Well, the report was at the request of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, and it was basically put into law in December 2021 as part of the Coronavirus Relief Bill, which sounds kind of weird, but really the Coronavirus Relief Bill was this, $1 trillion bill, which was an omnibus bill, and they had all these other little bills kind of slotted in here and there. And so the fact that it was in this bill isn't really that suspicious. It's kind of like, pork or earmarks in bills, you quite often get individual politicians putting in their favorite things into these bills. And this actually came about with no House or Senate discussion. It wasn't something that the government debated, shall we look into this? And the government wasn't like, really worried about it. And most senators had not even heard about it. It really came about from one guy, Marco Rubio, the senator from Florida, who was at the time the chairman of the Senate Select Committee of Intelligence, and he got this language into the bill. Why did Marco Rubio do it? He did it via one other guy, Chris Mellon. Chris Mellon is, essentially a lobbyist. He's a person who lobbied Marco Rubio and got this got this language into law. And this is why we have the report now, essentially via this one guy, Chris Mellon. Chris Mellon is connected to another guy, Tom DeLonge. Some of you may have heard of Tom DeLonge, some of you may have not. He is a popular musician. He's the frontman, lead guitarist, I believe, for the band Blink-182, which was very popular like 10 years ago, still fairly popular now. But he's a musician who has a long-standing interest in UFOs, and he started an organization to promote UFOs. Chris Mellon works with Tom DeLonge. Chris Mellon got this language in from Marco Rubio. So we get this report from the government, and people think that there's some kind of, the government is telling us everything they know. But really, it's just because one person talked to another person, who talked to a third person, who got some language inserted into this bill that made its way into the coronavirus relief omnibus bill. It's not really this big movement on the part of the government to do something. It's some interested parties lobbying for this. And really, it's the culmination of a 4-year PR and lobbying campaign, which I'll get into in a little bit more detail later. And the driving force behind this, and behind a lot of the media attention, was actually the 3 Navy videos, which I showed very briefly at the start. There's 3 famous videos, black and white videos. I'm going to look at those in a little bit more detail later. But really what happened was the media picked up on the story, and they constantly show these videos. Whenever you see a story about this report, you are going to see one of these 3 videos, and perhaps one of these newer videos, like the green video that they have now with the green triangle. And that really has been the driving force. Now, a side note here, which I don't really have time to get into this aspect of it, but if you are interested, and some of you will probably know about this already, but I really would encourage you to look up the UFO Invisible College. Now, it's not called exactly that, the UFO Invisible College, but if you search for that, UFO Invisible College, you will get the relevant information. And there's a fascinating article by Jason Colavito. It's really about the background of the people who do this type of thing, who push the government for UFO disclosure and have been working on doing this for a long time. Chris Mellon is a member of the Invisible College. Okay, so let's have a look at a bit of historical context for the UAP videos and this UAP report. Like, how did we actually get here? I'm going to kind of go backwards in time. So before the UAP report, we had the UAP task force. This at the time was this huge announcement: a UAP task force has been established to investigate UFOs. It's basically the same thing as the report. The people on the UAP task force are the same people who wrote the report. But back in August, they set this up just to kind of look into the issue. Apparently, it's only 2 guys with no budget, so it's not exactly the world's largest task force. Then, back in April last year, April 27th, 2020, the videos were officially released by the US government. Now, this, again, was this massive media thing that these videos had been released. The 3 videos were FLIR, One, Gimbal, and Go Fast, and the government released them and said, here are some official UFO videos. And the media kind of, went crazy. They started like, going all over these videos, like showing them constantly, interviewing people, asking, what does this mean? Are we being invaded by aliens? But the thing that they all missed was that even though the government released these videos in 2020, the videos actually came out years earlier. The videos had been available for many years since. In one case, one of the videos that was released came out in 2007, and the other 2 came out in 2017 and early 2018. So the media was making a big fuss over essentially nothing. There's videos that people have been looking at for years. I had been looking at them for years. Everybody in the UFO community had been looking at them for years. All of a sudden, the government says like, "Oh, here are these videos." The videos were already there, so it was a big fuss over nothing. But it was a very good PR move. So how did we get here? Going back in time again, the latest of the videos that was released was March 2018. This was the last video to be released. March 2018, a video called Go Fast was released in the Washington Post. And before that, the same video was actually released a little bit before that by the To the Stars Academy. To the Stars Academy is the organization that was formed by Tom DeLonge, the lead singer of Blink-182, who is the employer and co-founder of To the Stars Academy, and the employer essentially of Chris Mellon, who is the lobbyist who lobbied the government to get this UAP report put out. And so back in 2018, they were releasing these videos that were later going to be part of essentially this investigation and a big part of the media campaign. Now, this whole thing really started, though, back in December 2017 with the release of this story, Glowing Auras on Black Money, the Pentagon's Mysterious UFO Program, a New York Times story by Helen Cooper, who's a national security military reporter, Ralph Blumenthal, who was a retired New York Times reporter, and Leslie Keane, who wasn't really a New York Times reporter, but has written a lot about UFO stories before. And they wrote this story for the New York Times. And this was a seismic shift in the UFOs community's perception of itself. All of a sudden, they were being taken seriously. All of a sudden, the New York Times, the Gray Lady, the newspaper of record, was writing about UFOs. And not only were they writing about UFOs, they were releasing videos of UFOs, and not just any old videos, very impressive looking videos that were apparently from the US Navy. So this was a big deal. This was a big deal for the UFO community, and it was a big deal for the media. The media now had permission to talk about UFOs. The New York Times is a very serious newspaper. If the New York Times can write an article about it, anyone can write an article about it. If the New York Times can release videos, we can show those videos on national TV and talk about them as if they are serious UFO videos. So this was a big change. And of course, along with the New York Times story was Tom DeLonge and Chris Mellon with To the Stars Academy. At the same time, basically on the same day, they launched the To the Stars Academy. And during the launch, they showed the same videos that were shown by the New York Times. So essentially, it was a coordinated media campaign where these people who were trying to push for disclosure, trying to push for UFO disclosure that the government knows about aliens, as kind of coordinated with the New York Times on getting this story out at the same time as the To the Stars Academy, Tom DeLonge's vehicle, was being launched. Okay, and these videos again were not new. These two videos were new, but the other one that actually came out in 2007. Chris Mellon was the guy who released the other two videos from the Pentagon, but he didn't release this one. This was actually leaked, and it came out on the Above Top Secret forum, which is this kind of forum that has basically a lot of conspiracy theory stuff going on. It's a very interesting forum, and they have a lot of debunking as well. It's kind of fascinating. And someone leaked it on this forum, and it appeared on this web server in Germany, and you can still find it there on this web server in Germany via the Wayback Machine. It's very mysterious. It didn't get very much attention at the time, but now it's perhaps one of the best known UFO videos ever because it got pushed into the limelight with this media campaign. Now, I'm going to talk a bit about the videos in a second, but first of all, I want to talk about a relevant case study, one that I looked into some time ago, and this is the 2017 Chilean Navy UFO video. Now, we're talking here about the US Navy videos, these 3 videos I just discussed that were leaked. But back in the year before they came out, the 2 new ones came out, the Chilean Navy saw this UFO. It was taken from a Navy helicopter. They saw a shape in the infrared camera. They zoomed in on it, and they saw it's black hot here in infrared. So what you see as being black is actually hot. So we know it's a hot object, and it's leaving some kind of trail, apparently, of a hot liquid or gas behind it. It's very suspicious. No one knew what it was. The pilots couldn't figure it out, and so they reported it to the government. And the Chileans actually have a UAP, a UFO task force that actually looks into these things. So what happened was the Huffington Post broke the story. Now, the reporter for the Huffington Post was Leslie Keane, which is one of the same reporters as the New York Times story, not coincidentally. But the Huffington Post broke this story about the Chilean UFO, and they described it as an exceptional 9-minute Navy video of a UFO displaying highly unusual behavior, studied by Chilean authorities for the last 2 years. So let that sink in. The Chileans studied this for 2 years, and finally broke the story to the Huffington Post about this amazing thing. And these were highly trained professionals with many years' experience who were absolutely certain that they could not explain what they saw. And this isn't just the pilots couldn't explain it. These are all the professionals who actually looked into it. And they had an official conclusion. They actually announced the Chilean government body, the UAP task force, announced that it is a UAP, an unidentified aerial phenomena. And they reached this conclusion because of the number of highly researched reasons that it was unanimously agreed could not explain it. So basically, they eliminated everything. This is a photo of the actual task force. All these people are, kind of former military, some current military. They're in their uniforms. There's a whole bunch of them. There's 10 people, maybe more, sat around this table. Very serious people. They eliminated, these experts. They eliminated a plane. They eliminated a plane because the plane would have showed up on the radar. No one saw it on the radar. It would have answered the radio. It didn't. And the planes don't dump hot liquid. And the thing couldn't have been a contrail because contrails form above 26,000 feet, and this was lower. It's not space junk. It's not a hoax. It's not a balloon. It's not a bird or an insect. It's not a drone. It's not a parachute or a hang glider. So they eliminated all these things and made this great announcement that it was, in fact, a UFO, a UAP. And they proved that it couldn't be anything else. So the story broke. And the story broke on January the 5th, 2017. On January the 6th, the next day, somebody tweeted to me at McWest, could this be a plane in its contrail? And I hadn't seen this story yet. I hadn't known that the Chilean authorities had ruled out a plane. So I looked at it and I thought, yes, it actually could be a plane and its contrail. And there's a type of contrail called an aerodynamic contrail, which starts and stops in this very particular way, which looks very similar to me to what we see in the video. And there's actually 2 types of contrails. There's aerodynamic contrails, which form over the wing, and then there's exhaust contrails that form from the engine. Aerodynamic contrails form at a much lower altitude, a much lower potential altitude. They can form down to 14,000, 15,000 feet, depending on the weather. So that's just something I happen to know, which perhaps people on the task force didn't know. So they eliminated a contrail because they thought it formed above 26,000 feet, but it can actually form below 26,000 feet. Why is it hot? Why does it appear as hot? Black is hot in this video, and how could that be? But contrails are just ice clouds. But it turns out that first of all, you look at this scene here, and you see there's clouds that are black. They're not hot; they're just clouds. And it turns out that if you take ice and you view it against the sky, ice appears black in an infrared video. I did a little test where I took some ice cubes. They appear white at first because they are cold, but if you move the camera down so that they are seen against the sky, they turn a very dark gray, and they can in fact appear as black. So a little practical experiment showed that it could in fact have been a contrail, something that they actually eliminated. The experts all eliminated this. And this, I did this the day after it came out. So if we think maybe it's a plane with a contrail, can we find the plane? And it turns out, yes, we can. We had the GPS coordinates. We had the date and time on screen. and we could use planefinder.net to see what planes were in the area. And we found a couple of candidate planes, and we stuck them in Google Earth. We recreated the paths in 3D. We moved the camera down to where the helicopter was. We saw what they would have seen, and wham, bam, there is a plane that fits the exact location of this particular video. And if you take a model of a plane, stick it into Google Earth and move the camera back down again, have a look at what it would look like, it's a pretty good fit. Yeah, it's a pretty good approximate size and shape for this blob that's there. But why is it a blob? Why is it a weird blob? Why can't we see the plane in infrared? Well, it turns out that when you look at something hot in infrared, you see glare. Glare is bigger than the thing you're looking at, and so it obscures what you're looking at. So all we're seeing basically is the glare from the very bright heat/light from the engine. It's infrared radiation, which is essentially equivalent to light in the visible spectrum, and you get glare. Like if you look at the sun, you see glare around the sun. Glare is just a stray light around the bright light source, the same type of thing. And this will actually be important later, so I'm going to come back to this idea. I did a little test. I set up 4 candles and moved my infrared camera back, and everything turned into a big blob. Turns out that individual heat sources turn into blobs when they're far enough away. You can see I'll actually zoom in on the candles, so you can see that they actually are what we're looking at. 4 engines. 4 candles, looks like a blob in the distance. So everything kind of seems to fit. Here's the actual shape of the plane, and here's what it looked like in the video, and it just fits the exact configuration of the engine. So I kind of declared this one solved, and everyone agreed with me. It's like hard to disagree with it, because we have the radar tracks, we have the matching contrail, we have the shape of the glare, everything matches, case closed. Solved it in 2 days. Conclusively solved it in perhaps like 2 or 3 weeks, but the Chilean Navy and the Chilean Air Force, their body of experts did not solve it. And the lessons are that experts make mistakes. Even if you've got lots of experts, military pilots make mistakes. Perspective can be very confusing if you don't know what you're looking at. And if you're not really an expert at looking at these types of things, very easy to get confused. Infrared glare hides planes. Radar, it didn't show up on the radar because they were looking 40 miles ahead of them when they should have been looking 80 miles ahead of them. They were looking in the wrong spot. And they were wrong for 2 years. They spent 2 years eliminating things, but they eliminated planes way too early in the situation, and they got it wrong. They didn't ask the internet, which is a very good way of solving UFO cases. Just ask the internet, they'll let you know. Okay, let's quickly go through the US Navy videos. Now, these, I have much more detailed explanations of them on my YouTube channel if you want to get into the details, but I'm going to go over the basics here. First of all, we have the FLIR 1 video. This is from the US Nimitz encounter, and this is where a pilot saw this tic-tac flying around. They sent out another plane. He took this video. Now, they claim that this video does amazing things, like it moves very rapidly and it zooms off the screen at the end. And, you watch the video, it kind of looks like it does. But what I did is I kind of went through the video frame by frame, and I tried to figure out what's actually going on. And the first thing I noticed was that whenever the object moves on screen, it's when the camera operator is changing the camera. And I went through them all, and they all correlated. Every single time it moved, like just right there, it moved because he had changed the camera. There's a glitch, the object moves. So it turns out the object isn't actually moving rapidly. That little rotation it just did then was a camera rotation. It's not actually shooting off to the side of the screen when what's actually happening is just changing the lenses on the camera. It's like when you're using a microscope and you rotate the lenses, you see the picture move. And that's exactly what happens in this particular case. Now we can do a little bit of math on this. We can see, let's quickly go over the details. It was filmed back in 2004. No one actually saw it by eye. All they saw was this video. It's just showing infrared glare. Okay, now the question is, this question you get asked a lot, or a question I ask a lot in UFO videos is it small or far away? And in this case, we know the angular width of the camera. We can do a little bit of math in it and figure out that it's 0.25 degrees per individual thing. And if you know the angular size of something, you can kind of get and you estimate the distance to it, you can figure out how big it is. So what we can do is take the math and see what would it be if it was 1 mile away. If it was 1 mile away, it would be 2.3 feet in size. If it was 10 miles away, it'd be 23 feet in size. If it was 20 miles away, it'd be 46 feet in size. And this is where we kind of get to about the sweet spot. That's about the size of a fighter jet. If it was 40 miles away, it would be 115 feet in size, about the size of a Boeing 737. So we got some ranges to work with there. Is it what size is it? What are the possible things here? Another number we have on the screen here is the angle. Right here, we have a number which is 5 degrees, meaning it's actually looking up at 5 degrees. We have the altitude. The camera's at 20,000 feet. We're looking up at 5 degrees. Do a little bit more math, and we get a range of possibilities. If it's 20 miles away, it's at 29,000 feet, which is a perfectly reasonable height for a fighter jet to be flying at. If it's 50 miles away, 40,000 feet, still within the range of operation of most planes. So it's quite consistent with it just being a plane that's far away. So this is the bit that gets everyone excited. At the end of the video, it flies off to the left. I mean, why does it do that? Well, it leaves the frame in 0.75 seconds, which is 4.3 seconds per degree, which coincidentally is the exact same rate that the camera was moving. So it's not actually the object moving. What's happened was the camera was tracking, it lost track, the camera stops moving, the object just whizzes off. So nothing actually interesting happens on this video. That's what I just said. All right, so it's an unidentified object. I don't know what it actually is. I got a range of things it might be, so I've not solved it, but I have, however, demonstrated that it's not amazing. It's not something that requires alien technology to explain. All right, let's quickly go on to the Go Fast video. Now, this is a fun little video. This looks like you see this little white object moving over the surface of the ocean. It looks like it's moving really fast. And then they lock onto it, and then they're tracking it. And they describe it as hauling ass at 2/3 the speed of sound. But is it actually doing that? What's actually on screen here? We've got, again, some interesting numbers. We got the airspeed, the calibrated airspeed there, 254 knots. And we got the altitude, 25,000 feet. We can use those to get the actual airspeed, which is more like 350 knots, I believe. We know that we're looking down at 26 degrees. Very simple. Here's the camera's just angled down 26 degrees. We know that we have a range to the object of 4.4 nautical miles, which is the distance from the camera to the object. Now, if we know what angle the camera is looking down at, and we know the range, we can do some super simple trigonometry. We can just use 4.4 times the sine of 26. Gives us 1.92 nautical miles. That is the distance below the camera that this object is. Really simple trigonometry. If you don't follow it, get a high schooler to explain it to you, because it's just 10th grade trigonometry. Any 10th grader, anyone like 15, 16, 17-year-old who's taken math courses recently should be able to figure it out. We can subtract the numbers, and that gives you the actual altitude of the object, which is 13,000 feet, which is about halfway between the camera in the plane and the surface of the ocean. So instead of it being an object that's skimming over the surface of the ocean, it's something much higher up, which means that the parallax effect now comes into effect. If you move your viewpoint when you're looking around something, it could look like it's moving relative to the background. And if it's halfway between you and that background, it could look like it's moving very fast. So we can actually do a little bit more math on that. We know the angle, the bearing, and we can figure out where the object is at the start and where it is at the end, and where the jet is at the start and where the jet is at the end. And this is how far the object actually moves. This is how far the jet moves. This object is not going very fast at all. It's actually only going about 40, 50 knots, which is about a wind speed differential at that altitude. So it's not fast and it's not low. It's actually high and slow. It's not even very big. We can again do the math there. It's perhaps 6 feet, perhaps even less than that. What could it be? It moves about wind speed. It's a few feet wide. It's roughly spherical. Has no heat source. It shows up as cold, and it shows up on the radar. Well, one thing that fits that is a weather balloon. Weather balloons are about 6 feet in diameter. They're round. They have radar reflectors, and they just float along. And we have parallax. This balloon isn't really moving. It's hardly moving at all. As we actually have the GPS data for this video as well. The balloon's just floating in the air. A helicopter is flying past it, but because the helicopter is focused on the balloon, it looks like the balloon is whizzing over the ground, but it isn't. It's just floating in the air. And finally, out of the 3 videos, we have the gimbal video. Now, this is it's a fun video. It looks very impressive, and it's the video that everyone likes to talk about because it shows a flying saucer. It shows a flying saucer that flies along over these clouds, and it's rotating. It's filmed on the same day as the GoFast, probably by the same plane. I think it was the same plane, the same people. Shows a saucer shape flying rapidly over the clouds, and it kind of skims over the clouds, and then it slows down and stops and rotates on its end, and they exclaim, "It's rotating!" It's very impressive. And it's the most difficult of the videos to explain because it's actually very complicated. And I guarantee that a lot of you will not understand my explanation. Some of you will, but some of you will not because it's complicated. I don't understand it sometimes. So is it just a glare? Now, you remember the Chilean Navy case. It was this giant plane, an Airbus A340, and it was obscured by glare. So perhaps what we're looking at here is the back of another plane, like perhaps another fighter jet, an FA-18 like that. Okay? And we could be just following another FA-18 and we're looking at the engines from behind because it's infrared. The glare covers the plane. But it's kind of complicated. Why is it shaped like that if it's a glare? Why can't you see any of the plane? Well, you couldn't see it in the Chilean case. Why does it rotate? Why is it actually rotating here? This is kind of weird. Why does it slow down and stop? It's hardly moving at this point. And why is there a cold aura around it? Now, this is black hot, so the engines appear as black, but around the black, there's this kind of white glow around it, which looks cold, which is kind of weird. And the explanations are quite complicated, and people complain that you have to do mental gymnastics to understand this. And maybe we should just go with the simple explanation. Maybe we should just say, it's some kind of anti-gravity warp drive. It's warping space. It's rotating, standing on its end. That's the simplest explanation. Occam's razor. It's a flying saucer. But let's go through the actual explanations first. First of all, the cold aura. Well, this cold glow around a hot object in infrared turns out it's just a common artifact of infrared cameras. They have this thing called an unsharp mask, which increases the contrast around hot objects. You see there's a faint halo around this one and a big halo around this one. This is just a sharpening artifact. You see it all the time in all kinds of videos. It's nothing special. But the New York Times titled their story, "Glowing Auras and Black Money." Why couldn't they figure it out? Why didn't the UAP task force figure it out, or the people back then? Why didn't they figure it out? It's very strange that no one actually figured this out because it's very, very simple and straightforward. And you see it moving there with the engines. And why does it slow down and stop? Well, it's probably just a parallax effect. The plane is banking to the left. It's kind of turning around. At first, it's looking out the side window, like you're looking out of your car at something, and you're going past it. It whizzed by the window. You turn around to face something. It's now in front of you. It doesn't seem to be moving. And that's really all that's going on there. What is the shape of the glare? Now, the shape of a glare, like this one here, depends on the optics of the camera, but it also depends on various other things like diffraction effects and focus effects. And what you can do, like you see, I've got a glare here and it rotates as I rotate the camera. And you see it's kind of saucer shaped with these spikes on either side. Now, if I touch the lens at the back, you'll see it changes direction and it changes shape. This is because I'm swiping my finger in different directions around the back of my camera, and the shape of the glare changes. And it ends up as being this nice saucer shape. So it's entirely possible for a glare to be saucer shaped with little spikes on, just like this one in the video. So And if the camera rotates, as I demonstrated here with my iPhone, the shape of the glow rotates. And is the camera rotating? I think it is. And this is something you might not come across in Zoom very well, but you can look at this in other things. Put it all different sizes so you can see it. But you see the shape here rotating. Now, if you look at the sky, especially this area up here, you might see that the entire shape of the sky appears to rotate. So it's not just this little shape rotating. The entire light pattern that's coming into the camera is rotating. Now, obviously, the sky isn't rotating. So the only thing that could be causing this rotation of the entire field is if the camera itself is rotating. So if the camera itself is rotating and it's making these lights in the sky rotate, it's probably also making this glare rotate. So why would the camera rotate? Well, it's actually quite complicated. This is a very expensive, like $20 million camera system. It's a targeting pod, essentially. And it does fine tracking with internal mirrors. And then it's got this external mounted gimbal system. And this gimbal system cannot traverse 0 degrees whilst it's looking down. I kind of demonstrate that with, this is something I did in my backyard, but this is the same type of mount. And here is the line of sight. Now, if you move the line of sight from left to right, when it gets to the straight ahead, it can't actually go straight over. So I had to do that big rotation there. So I can move it left and right here, but to get across, it would actually go up in the air because of the way it's pointed. So I have to do a rotation here, whoop, and now it can go on the other side. And that's what we see in the gimbal video. So it's complicated, but no magic is required, and it actually does pass Occam's razor, unlike the UFO explanation, which requires us to invent an entire alien civilization. And it's complicated. I went over that fast because I have limited time, but even when I take more time to explain it, it's difficult to explain. But just because it's complicated doesn't mean it's wrong. Now, since those 3 videos have come out, there's been more. And one that Dave alluded to earlier is this one here, which is I don't know, what do we call it? We call it the Green Pyramid video. Now, supposedly this shows a flashing green pyramid UFO that's flying through the air. And you see a couple more green pyramids just hovering there, and it flies past these 2 other green pyramids. And this is something I kind of, again, recognized almost immediately what it probably was, which is a thing called bokeh. When you have a light source which is out of focus, and you have a camera lens, like I have a camera lens here that has a triangular aperture. And if your camera lens has a triangular aperture, then the shape of out of focus lights will be the same shape as that. So if you have a hexagonal one, it'll show up as a hexagon. If you have a triangle, it'll show up as a triangle. And I kind of recognize that as that's what it probably was. I also have started to investigate this more, and I found people who had night vision monoculars, which is what this is taken with, a night vision monocular that have triangular irises, and they create images exactly like this. And in this particular example, we see these 2 other shapes here, which are triangular shaped. It's a bit difficult to see in here, but you see them as they move around, that they are actually triangular shapes. So, what were these? Are these two other things that were flying around in the sky? Well, it turns out that what I did was take the video, and at the start of the video, we actually have a constellation, a recognizable constellation of stars, and we have the planet Jupiter, which is there on that particular day. So we could see exactly where we were in the star field. So I took Stellarium, which you may be familiar with. It's this free program, and started the video here, and then traced the movement of the video using the movement relative for clouds across the sky in Stellarium until it ended up at the end over here. And these 2 other lights kind of come into view, and then we kind of go in and zoom down, and you will see it fly by these other 2 triangles. And turns out these are the 2 triangles here are just 2 stars in that exact position there in the star field. There's 2 stars, the same kind of relative brightness and the same angle and everything. And this this triangle here flies past them. And if those stars appear as triangles, that proves that the triangle shape of the UFO is in fact just a camera artifact. And we did more investigation, which you can look up on my YouTube channel. We found planes flying overhead. We did replication of it. We figured out the angles and the speed and everything. But basically, it's almost certainly just a plane flying overhead. Now, that one came out before the UAP report, but since then, new leaks have emerged. This one shows a video of a object here, which is following this Warthog, this A-10 aircraft, very fast aircraft. So, like, how could it possibly be doing that? Let me just play that again so you see what's going on. Comes in on the left-hand side, flies across. It kind of looks like it starts to follow the plane. But this is very misleading because the camera's moving a lot. And so what I did was I took the same video and I stabilized it. And I traced the path that the object took. This is the plane here, just simply stabilized in position. And you'll notice that the little object traces this sinusoidal path, which is actually the exact same type of path that certain types of bird do. It's called I think a bound and glide path, or a bounding path. Birds, they flap their wings for a little period of time, and then they go, and then they just kind of glide, and then they go again. So they do this sinusoidal path. It's a fairly well-known thing in ornithology. If you're a bird watcher, you will see the smaller birds do this, finches especially. And if you look at what's actually going on in the object itself, you'll see that there are what look like little wing flaps happening when it gets to the bottom of these dips, and then it does a little glide. So a leaked video released to great fanfare was again debunked in a couple of days. So these are very disappointing that we haven't actually got any evidence of aliens so far. No evidence of any amazing stuff. And the report came out. It was a bit of a disappointment. So is this flap over? The UAP report was a bit of a bust. We didn't get any new information. They didn't even list any of the cases or explain what analysis they had done. So it was very disappointing for a lot of people. People tried to salvage from it by saying, oh yeah, but they're investigating it, so it's official now, so it's the greatest thing ever. But really, they were very sad. The UFO people were very sad that nothing actually came of it. The videos don't show anything amazing. The videos that I just showed you there, these are things that were considered by the UAP task force. These were official Navy videos of things that were unidentified. And while I haven't exactly identified everything in these videos, I've shown that they are not amazing. They don't make rapid accelerations. They're not flying pyramids, and they're not like objects that can follow an A-10 Warthog around in the sky. They're just things like birds and balloons and distant planes. They're really pretty boring. That doesn't mean I've reached a different conclusion to the Navy. It just means that I've eliminated some possibilities, and they haven't discussed whether they've eliminated those possibilities because it's all classified and they're not going to tell you. But they haven't said that they haven't said that they don't know anything at all about them, and they haven't said that these videos show amazing movement. So I don't think that they do. Need more data was the conclusion of the report. And this is a 70-year-old story. Since the dawn of the UFO culture, all we've had have been blurry photos, and we've had eyewitness accounts, and we've not had a good solid data set that we can sink our teeth into that shows that something amazing is going on. So with all this, like, the media attention is starting to subside. There's less and less stories. There was a flurry when the report was released, and everyone got interviewed, and now it's just dying down because what was there? There wasn't really anything in the report, and it really isn't that interesting. So I think people are just gearing up for the next thing. It's not going to go away, of course, because UFO fans are going to UFO fan, and UFOs do actually exist. I see them all the time, little white specks in the sky. I can't identify them. They're probably birds or planes, but people are going to look up and see things. They're going to see things in the sky that they can't identify. And there are real issues. I mean, we mustn't forget in all of this that there are real serious things going on here. If a Navy pilot sees something that they can't identify, that is a serious issue, regardless of what it actually was. Were they seeing things? That's serious. Is it something that drifted into their training range? That is serious. Is it a foreign spy platform? That is serious. Is it a alien spaceship? That would be serious. But there are lots of other serious possibilities. There are issues that we need to look into. When we get a return on the radar and it's not what we expect, is that because the radar isn't working? It's a serious problem. So there are real issues, but ultimately nothing really happened with the report. The videos didn't amount to very much. The report didn't amount to very much. The interest will continue, and I'm going to continue looking into it. So that's it. That's all I got. Thank you very much. And I will be happy to answer any questions people have.
Well, that was excellent, Mick.
Thank you.
All righty. It looks like Mark Fraser has something in the chat. Concerning the Chilean UFO, did you send your analysis to their Navy, or do you know if they are aware of it?
I did not send it directly to them, but Leslie Keane, who was in communication with them, was made aware of it very quickly, because she'd written this very detailed and effusive story in the Huffington Post, and she'd obviously spent a long time doing it, and she'd gone to Chile to meet people and did a lot of other stuff and spent months writing the story. And then I come along and debunk it in 2 days, and she wasn't very happy about that, and she kind of pushed back at first, but eventually she figured out that it was in fact probably just a plane, and she wrote another follow-up story, and then very quickly kind of pushed it all under the rug. And the Chileans themselves just kind of didn't really talk about it after that.
Wow. Ben Radford, you had a comment about Leslie Keane. You want to amplify on that?
Oh yeah, I just first of all, Mick, this is a great talk. I'm just so impressed. I love the analysis you bring to it, and the experiments and the hands-on stuff. It's amazing work. I'm just glad that you're taking the handle on this, because there's just so much out there. I wanted to ask you about and I did want to get about Leslie Keane. I confronted her on the Chilean video, and also on the there was a hoax that she endorsed.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was in Belgium. Later revealed as a hoax, and she was just cagey, and I mean, just trying to get her to admit that she was wrong was like pulling teeth.
Yeah, I think Leslie Keane is a little bit someone who wants to believe. I think she's generally a relatively rational person, but also has kind of been convinced that there is something to a lot of these stories, and so is perhaps a little bit more credulous than your average reporter is. But she's not stupid. Yeah, but she's perhaps takes things at face value a little bit more. She published a story a few years before this about UFOs, and they looked exactly like flies. If you put a camera in a field with some cows, you'll see black shapes whizzing around, which you could interpret as being alien spaceships, or you could interpret as being flies. And she chose the alien spaceships.
Of course you did. Well, I just wanted to ask quickly about the perils of skeptics adopting the burden of proof, because of course, as with many of these cases, if someone comes to me with a Bigfoot sighting or whatever sighting, I mean, I can just say, you haven't offered enough evidence, it's your burden of proof. But at the end of the day, of course, that's not going to necessarily convince anybody, because well, they just don't want to do it. So it's sort of a fine line to walk, because on one hand, you don't want to unnecessarily adopt the burden of proof to investigate these things, which isn't our job. On the other hand, if you don't, then it looks like you can't explain it. So
you kind of have to make a call on those. Someone posted a video on Metabunk earlier today, and I deleted it. And the reason I did it was a video from a channel of a guy who has literally hundreds of UFO videos. He's a guy who lives in Vegas, And he just sets up his camera every night and he films every bright light he sees in the sky. And some of them he can't figure out what they are, and those are the ones that he puts on his channel. And he has hundreds of videos. There's no point me going in and trying to explain every single one of these, just random lights in the sky. For one, he's obviously just, why is this one guy seeing everything and nobody else is seeing these UFOs? There's a million people live in Vegas, hundreds of thousands of people in Vegas, and no one else is really looking at these videos, so there's no real benefit. But when something raises to the level of national media, these green triangle videos and these Navy UFO videos, then it's definitely worth addressing. You can't just say, "Oh, you haven't proved that it's not. You haven't proved that it's this," because people feel that they have. People feel that these videos are great evidence of the extraterrestrial hypothesis, and you really do have to actually put the work in to demonstrate that they actually are not.
Randy Truman asks, the shape of the aerodynamic wake did not seem to be changing like a turbulent flow would cause. Ideas?
I'm not sure which one he's referring to there.
Is that the one that looked like a cigar, Randy?
Yes, I think so.
It's one of the Chilean ones then, yeah?
I think the Chilean
that
helicopter.
one. Yes. Yeah, okay, the Chilean Navy case. Well, that actually was a contrail. It wasn't really the aerodynamic wake. So it was an aerodynamic contrail. And
Right.
so what you're looking at there is a cloud, essentially just like a regular contrail. And what did you say about it? It didn't look right?
On the downstream trailing edge, it looked like it had some features that were not changing. Was this a relatively short time?
Yeah, well, contrails, once they've set, they do look like they're not changing, because it basically creates a cloud in the sky and there it is. It's just going to act like a cloud. It will very slowly spread. But yeah, the video there is only over like a couple of minutes at most. So if you see a contrail being formed, it won't. You see the turbulence at first, but it very rapidly settles down after maybe like 10, 15 seconds or so.
And how far away was the helicopter?
It was between like 60 and 120 miles.
I know that's hard to imagine that scale.
Yes. The angle of it is very deceptive. So we're seeing this contrail at a fairly shallow angle, which increases the visual density of it, and also changes the way you kind of perceive it, because you're not used to seeing a contrail at a shallow angle. Quite a few UFO reports actually come from people seeing planes traveling at right angle to their plane. You look out the window of your plane and you see another plane going away, say it's 1,000 feet below you, but it's traveling away. The contrail of that plane looks really, really weird because you're looking at it at a shallow angle, and that's kind of what we're seeing in this video as well.
Yeah, good.
John Durr has a question. Very few stories mention the possibility that some of these sightings are geophysical luminosities. What do you think about that?
Well, of course, that's something that people bring up a lot. So things like ball lightning, or geophysical luminosities would be things like earthquake lights, some kind of piezoelectric effects, like the Earth's electrical magnetic fields, like creating lights, which is kind of something of a mystical type of thing. Earthquake lights, you look them up and you will be told that they are this thing that really happens, but there's a lot of very sketchy evidence of earthquake lights. There's probably slightly more for actual ball lightning, but I wouldn't rule it out. And the UAP task force hasn't ruled out things like that atmospheric phenomena. Lights in the sky, it's quite possible that there are types of atmospheric phenomena or geophysical atmospheric phenomena that we just simply haven't discovered yet. It was only relatively recently that we discovered sprites. Sprites are these like kind of giant, short-lived red lightning bolts that appear in the upper atmosphere, which look very weird, but no one even knew about them 20 years ago. And there's another phenomena called a crown flash, which I encourage anybody to look up, which is an astonishing phenomena. It's this thing where a chunk of the top of a cumulonimbus cloud, like kind of dances from one position to another in an instant, like, and it's kind of like almost an electrical arc. It looks bizarre. And this is something, it had actually been described in the literature hundreds of years ago, but there were no videoed instances of it until 2007. No one has seen it before. And then somebody put this video up of this astonishing atmospheric phenomena in 2007 on YouTube, and then a whole bunch of people started seeing them then. And you might be forgiven for thinking it's a new phenomenon, but it did exist in the literature before that. So I think it's definitely possible that some UFOs are novel atmospheric phenomena that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, a few years ago, we had a very interesting speaker, Alberto Rodriguez. I'm not sure of his name, but he had some great examples of earthquake light. So it's a pretty interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, you look up the examples that you see if you just do a simple search on YouTube, and the majority of them are things like transformers exploding. This is a very common thing that happens during earthquakes, is that you get these blue flashes, and people then start to associate these blue flashes in the sky with earthquakes. But of course, I'd be open to the idea of seeing actual more convincing examples. But I'm not entirely buying it yet.
Okay.
I would put it in the same boat as ball lightning, in that it's something that probably could happen, but it's not very well understood.
I'll dig up that article and send it off to you. Mark Boslow has a question. What was your most difficult case, and do you have any that you were unable to solve?
Well, the most difficult cases are kind of like what it says in the UAP report. It's the ones where you don't have enough data. You see, if you had close-up video of whatever it was, then you would know what it was because you'd be able to see it. And if you had like great video of it moving around, you'd have a much better understanding of what it actually was. So a lot of the time we have very little data. And if you have a fuzzy video, like we have in these cases, you can't really get a solid answer as to what it was. But really the hardest cases are when we are just talking about eyewitness testimony. And there's a famous case here, the Nimitz case, which is where the first of these videos came from, the FLIR 1 video. There is a lot of eyewitness testimony from pilots. Commander David Fravo, the pilots who saw the tic-tac shaped craft, it was something that's shaped like this, like flying around. He claimed he watched it for 5 minutes. And there was another pilot who was with him, and she says she only saw it for 10 seconds, but she says she saw the same thing. How do you solve that? I can't. So I've essentially failed in that particular thing because there's not enough information in these eyewitness accounts. If we just say these eyewitness accounts are 100% accurate, then I don't know, it's a weird, fast-moving tic-tac shaped craft. We've got no idea. I can't really solve it. But perhaps their perception of it wasn't entirely correct. Perhaps their memories aren't entirely correct. Perhaps they missed certain things. So I don't know. I don't have the data, and they really don't have the data either. So eyewitness accounts, hardest thing to solve.
Great point. Robert Benon has a question about a mainstream news story he saw somewhere that said one curious issue was that some of the sightings were recorded by more than one source, like more than one military plane, thus casting doubt on the explanation of an artifact of the observing instrument.
Sure. That's true. If you get something showing up on two different cameras, then it can't be an artifact of one camera. Or if you have somebody see something and they also record it, that also makes it less likely to be some kind of artifact. Or if it shows up on the radar and it's on the camera. But in the UAP report, they list as a type of thing, the first thing they list is airborne clutter. which is things like birds and balloons and drones and debris like plastic bags. Those things would all show up on multiple sensors. So the fact that like a whole bunch of these objects showed up on multiple sensors doesn't necessarily mean that they are something amazing. It just means that they are physical objects, things like birds and balloons and drones, or perhaps alien spaceships, but probably birds and balloons and drones. But it doesn't rule out that some of the other ones, which did not show up on multiple sensors, could be atmospheric effects or some kind of glitch in the recording instrument.
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the analogies I like about aliens is bank robberies. Every year, the police try to solve all the bank robberies, and they solve a lot of them, but there are some residual number of cases, maybe 5 or 10%, that they never solve. And so for those, why should we assume it must have been extraterrestrials from some advanced alien civilization that have crossed the gulf of space to rob our bank? It's sort of a non sequitur. Just because we don't know who robbed the bank doesn't mean it was aliens. And just because we don't know what this strange picture of something moving in the sky was, doesn't mean that of course the true believers like to say, well, we eliminated weather balloons, we eliminated contrails, gotta be an alien.
So the quote from Sherlock Holmes, by Arthur Conan Doyle, but after somebody else, was that once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the answer. Which it would be true if everything was perfect, but you could append to that, like, unless you mistakenly eliminated something, like the Chileans did, they eliminated planes, or there's something that you just haven't thought of yet, or you've missed something.
And
Sherlock Holmes didn't know about Bayes' rule.
Yes.
And the Arthur Conan Doyle actually bought into the little paper fairies, the little girls that cut out little cutouts of fairies and convinced
Cottingley
them
fairies.
they had taken pictures of fairies.
I actually went to school in Cottingley, so I'm very familiar with the Cottingley fairy story. But just because someone is, I don't know, seemingly smart, it doesn't mean that they're entirely on the side of rationality. People like to believe in things, and a lot of the people that we're talking about, the people you see on TV promoting this and trying to be serious about UFOs, I think actually are believers in a fairly extreme version of the extraterrestrial hypothesis, and that they're even talking about things like ultra-terrestrials, which would be like a race of beings that secretly lives under the ocean near Catalina Island, or extra-dimensional beings, beings from a parallel dimension who are coming over. And these are hypotheses that have been put forward by the fairly serious people who are talking about these. The person, Chris Mellon, the guy who actually got this report language inserted in the coronavirus bill, he thinks that the Tic Tac was an alien spaceship.
When you mentioned that fellow that was just putting out thousands of UFO videos, and he never saw something that he didn't think was a good UFO video, reminded me of a TV show called Proof Positive, and they had me on there, and it was about the electric man, this man who claimed he was electric and could make streetlights turn on and off. And what he did, his wife would film him standing by streetlights, and they collected all the videos where the lights turned on and off. So, and they threw out everything else. And so at the end of his day, he had dozens of videos of him making the lights come on. And so as we measured him, and he was picking up KOB AM pretty well, but he really wasn't putting out electricity.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing was in the UAP report that we're discussing here, kind of touches on that, which is reporting bias. And they talk about how they tend to see these things around military operation areas and military training ranges, and also around nuclear power stations. And they pointed out that the reason that they see them more frequently around military bases is that military bases are very carefully guarded by people who are trained to observe anything out of the ordinary and report it. And they also have lots of recording equipment and sometimes even things like radars. So if you compare like a military base to say like a Walmart, you're not going to get very many reports of UFOs from Walmart, but you will get a lot from the military base because people are watching for things that are unusual. So reporting bias is a huge thing. And I was quite glad that the report actually kind of called that out as a real issue.
Excellent point. So, I did put that article about earthquake lights on the chat, and William Feening had a comment about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, long been established as the world's best known and most outspoken proponent of spiritualism.
Yeah, that's kind of a funny thing. Like if you want a hero, I'd go with Houdini. If you want someone to look back into that era, as you know, Houdini was kind of the James Randi of his day, really, going against spiritualism. But you know, we know that scientists are not immune to strange beliefs. Partly it's a product of their time, but partly it's just just because you're good at math doesn't mean you're going to be good at figuring out that magic isn't real.
And Uri Geller was able to fool physicists at Los Alamos that he could bend spoons. You need James Randi and a magician to keep you honest on that.
Uri Geller, interesting enough, kind of touches on this story in that one of the people who studied him was a guy called Hal Puthoff. And Hal Puthoff works with Tom DeLonge now at the To the Stars Academy. So he's gone all the way from studying Uri Geller and believing that Uri Geller could perform psychic acts to now working with Tom DeLonge in the rest of the Invisible College, trying to get UFO disclosure passed.
Is there any connection of the UFO College to like the disclosure people and Sturrock and the guy who Nevada guy who was paying for studies of implants, Bigelow, wasn't that?
Yeah, Bigelow. Bigelow is kind of the eye of the storm here, actually, of the Invisible College. He's the money man, the facilitator who gets things done. Bigelow has been involved in this for decades, and people like Chris Mellon have connections going back to years to him. Leslie Keane's boyfriend used to work for Bigelow, I believe, in one of his kind of psychic research things. The FAA used to direct all UFO reports to Robert Bigelow, which is kind of a bizarre thing. If you look up old FAA FAR AIM manuals, you will find there's a section in it that recommends what to do if you see a UFO. And they say, like, if it's doing something illegal, then call the police. Otherwise, call the Bigelow Advanced Science Center, something like that. But it's basically Robert Bigelow. And to this day, there's actually a live phone number that you can call that's got a recorded message that has the Bigelow Aerospace thing. So he's been in it for a while. Robert Bigelow he ran the original, essentially the UAP task force back in the 2000s. And his friend Harry Reid kind of helped him get that particular contract. And Harry Reid, of course, is a big friend of all UFO people to this day. So this whole Invisible College thing is a fascinating story, and I encourage people to look into it.
Panetta, I guess Leon Panetta was a big UFO buff.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of people who former government people generally who've spoken up, like Brennan and Podesta, people like that. That's essentially what it is. I think it's essentially just people who are UFO fans, the UFO enthusiasts, and they have grown to believe that there is something to this UFO story. They're generally not very technical people, and they don't really understand what they're looking at. They wouldn't be able to look at the videos and analyze them, but they've been convinced, and a lot of that is in part just from people talking to them and convincing them. It's partly kind of like a cult. You've got these invisible college people in there pushing this narrative, and people are falling for it. So it's a little bit like a cult, but it's also just people enjoy UFOs. People really like science fiction, and they want it to be true, and they perhaps are easily convinced that it's true because they would like it to be true. And then some people have seen UFOs themselves, and that makes it very easy to convince them that there's something to it.
Indeed. Okay. Well, looks like we don't have any new questions. That was a excellent lecture, and I really appreciate the home experiments that you do. Just that bring so much clarity to these things. So you were on CNN. Did you get on any other networks about it?
I got a couple of interviews on German TV for some reason, and a few local TV stations as well. The New York local TV wanted to talk to me, but yeah, I think the media interest is fading away now. We're just left with people who are making documentaries, and we'll see what comes out of that. Okay.
Well, thanks for an excellent talk. And next week, or next month rather, James Gover will talk about what our congressional delegation should consider. That was very interesting. Thanks, Mick.
Thank you.
All righty. Well, take care, everybody.
All
See
right.
you in August.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.